video as you go through it. They'll probably help you.
Great. Yeah, I started recording it.
Cool.
Awesome. I'll put you over here so I can see. Okay, great.
Sorry, one sec.
No worries, no worries.
Where? Okay, there we go. All right, can you see?
Yep.
All right. So there's two types of design challenges. Usually there's an abstract problem-solving kind, and then there's one that's a bit more literal, and it's usually designed like an app or something.
Right.
What kind of design challenge or whiteboard challenge do you want practice with?
I never really thought about that. What are just two different types of whiteboard challenges? Usually the ones that I did were very conceptual and like they just give you a really broad overview of a problem and they sort of just let you go off from there. So like whether it is, designing a app to hypothetically improve like an elevator experience, how would you do it, right? Or like it's either like one of those.
Okay. Let's do. So have you done any whiteboarding challenges, like real ones in an interview?
No, I haven't, which is why I wanted to practice.
So generally, I believe most companies will do more of a practical challenge. Only some companies that have like a very design focused culture, like maybe I know Shopify does for sure because I interviewed with it. But Shopify, Airbnb, Netflix, like they might Square for sure. Those are the ones that I've interviewed with personally that do these abstract challenges, and those are really tricky to do if you haven't had any exposure or experience with it. But I'd say the vast majority of design whiteboarding exercises are more practical. So we can focus on that if you want. And if you want to do an abstract one another time, you can do that as well. How does that sound?
Sure, that's fine. I'm on board with that.
Okay, cool. Let's just choose a prompt then. Do you want me to give you one?
Sure. Yeah.
Existing product or brand new product?
Let's do a brand new product.
Okay. What type of industry are you interested in?
Well, right now it's more focused on e-commerce, but again, things might change, but I'm doing more e-commerce stuff right now at the moment.
Okay. What's a big pain point that e-commerce, let's say merchants have?
Being able to provide, actually a big pain point that merchants has, being able to provide like a credible source of I guess credible information for the shoppers to buy in and buy the products. Would that be considered a pain point?
Design a solution that allows new e-commerce merchants to build credibility. How does that sound?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So high level, walk me through your typical whiteboarding process. What's most helpful for you? Do you want to see me do it? Do you want to do it and have me give you feedback? Do you want me to give you a bit of a crash course on how I personally approach it and then you try?
I'm sort of like a learn that sort of, if I do it, I'll learn more as I go along.
Okay.
And if I make mistakes, then I can really reflect on it. So I guess I can tackle it on first, just so you can see what my process is.
Right.
Right. So the prompt is design a solution that allows new e-commerce merchants to build credibility. So typically, again, because I worked with prompts that was a bit more conceptual, I would generally ask myself, because I don't really ask anyone else, like what exactly is the problem I'm trying to solve. But because our prompt here is, building credibility, I would I would then ask, uh,
Well,
what?
just because I gave you the prompt doesn't mean it's framed in the right way.
Oh, okay. So then, is it all right for me to ask? So what exactly? Like, what exactly are we trying to? Wait, what exact problem are we trying to fix, or what exact problem are we really trying to fix for this product or this app that we're trying to build?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. You generally want to have a hypothesis for why this prompt or opportunity or problem exists and why it's important, right?
Okay.
So
Um,
sometimes I might just be like, hey, design a new product for an e-commerce merchant. Then you might need to be more granular. Sometimes they'll say like design a solution that does this. And then it's kind of up to you to kind of state your assumptions on why um why the prompt exists. Like what is the actual like business outcome that we want?
okay.
Because allowing new e-commerce merchants to build credibility isn't a business outcome. It's a product outcome.
Okay.
Might be
Um,
a product goal.
okay. Now I'm thinking because you said thinking about more on the business side, like, are we building
And
this because are we,
mhm.
I'm sorry, are we building this because the current existing solution right now, merchants are experiencing, not, they're not generating enough revenue because not many people are buying the products because of trust and credibility? Or should I?
So the first step you always do
Mhm.
is when they give you the prompt, right? There's always incomplete information.
Right.
So you need to think about when you tackle a new problem, what core pieces of information do you need? And what part of the prompt answers those and what part doesn't. And then you want to either ask follow-up questions or you can state your assumptions, right?
Okay.
So let's just, I'm going to highlight a couple things here.
New
Okay.
e-commerce build credibility.
So before we even get into the prompt, let's think about like, um, think about who. So it's like who we are in this prompt. Who are we designing for? Um, what what are our business outcomes? Outcomes. Um, okay, okay. Let's just try and give you a better framework here. That makes more sense. Okay, so who, what, when is not relevant, where.
Okay.
Um, where this is just more like, what locate geographic locale are there special cultural and geospecific constraints. Well, actually, let me just think about this. Sorry, let's just focus on the who and the what for now. I think this is what you
Yeah.
need for most case studies. So who we are is actually really important in whiteboarding challenges because it kind of frames it like, are you a new startup? Are you an existing company? Like, depending on the maturity of your company, your market positioning, your goals might be different. Sometimes your design challenge will be like, oh, like you are LinkedIn, you're trying to build this new feature, or you are this company, you're trying to do this new feature. Or they'll say like you're a brand new startup trying to break into this space, um, trying to build this new product. So it's relevant for you to kind of know like, who you're designing as, because the solution for a startup versus a solution for an existing player, even the same prompt, to be very different. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then who are we designing for, which you kind of have here, who
Yeah.
your end user is.
Okay.
And what is the ideal business outcome? What is the product hypothesis? How do we know it'll solve the problem? What is the problem? Okay, so that roughly makes sense. And then, so you state your assumption. So who we are, you'll ask, let's just say we're a new startup, right?
Okay.
Then you might have like the how in that case, right? So is it going to be like an app extension, standalone, product, import? They're kind of like logistical issues. So like if you're interviewing for a company that is Shopify or something, they say like, oh, build a new Shopify app that does this. But if they leave it very open ended, you still want to walk them through this thinking of like who we are, and then are there special constraints or approaches that might differ significantly? Who we're designing for end user. This is basically like the new e-commerce merchants. Um, when they give you the prompt, you really want to dissect the phrasing each specific word, right? Like, what does new mean?
Oh,
Is
okay.
this like, within like 30 days, 60 days, new sale, X number of revenue
Okay.
amount? So you're defining the parameters, e-commerce, merchants. Is this, drop shippers? Is it like brand builders? Robert, is it I don't know, brick and
Mortar.
mort mortar converts? So you're really defining the parameters here, right? Like a beginner might look at this prompt, and then just start kind of designing. They always give you incomplete and or ambiguous information. You really need to set some time up front to kind of define the stuff. And then on the what is like, build credibility. What is
What is
credibility,
right?
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can talk about hypotheses, right? Is it like ratings? Is it reviews?
Mm-hmm.
Is it some sort of like badge? Is it some sort of verification?
Right.
Verification? And then it's like credibility on one specific platform, or is this a cross-platform solution, right?
Okay.
Can you see how like depending on like my answer to what I highlighted here, the solution would differ significantly?
A little bit. I understand why you said defining who we're building for, because this sort of gives me an idea of like what which end user that I mean which screen is dedicated to which end user at the end of the day.
Mhm.
But I didn't really think we need to go that deep into detail. Well, just because I never really thought about it that way before. Um, but
I'm not enforcing the specific template on you, by the
right,
way. I never have a template in my mind either. I think the main point I'm trying to drive home here is assume incomplete and ambiguous information. You automatically fail if you don't ask questions.
right,
So try and ask questions. Ideally, you ask good questions that get you to like the root of the problem as soon as possible. That'd be ideal. But if not, worst case, just ask as many questions as you can. and state your assumptions. A lot of the times the interviewer won't have the answer, or they'll make up the answer, or they'll ask you what you think. So you
Okay.
can always state your kind of assumptions up front as well, just to move forward.
Okay.
Um, a good kind of thing I like to do is at the beginning, when the interviewer talks through, gives you the prompt, right? Be like, here's my process. Be like, here is defining the problem plus gathering context,
Mhm.
right? And there's going to be kind of plus framing problem, brainstorm macro solutions, um, broad macro solutions. We can do IA, choose specific flow with IA to flesh out, interaction design, visual design, wrap up. This is, yeah, my usual process. And then I'll actually verbally say it out loud, right? I'll do like, let's do, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here. Sorry, I was trying to give more realistic times. 1, 2, okay. Yeah, something like this.
Okay.
So I'll actually say, like, once I get the prompt, I'd be like, hey, here's a process. Here's how much what I'm planning to do. This is about how much time I want to spend on each section. Does this make sense for you? Like, is there an area of my process you think I should spend more time focusing on? You can ask the interviewer that, because a lot of the times when you're doing whiteboarding challenge, it's actually most often used as like a gap filler in any aspects of your design skills they feel like they don't have a good enough grasp on. So I like to just like state this is my process up front, and then ask them like, hey, like, does it make sense? Should I spend more time on this or this?
Okay.
And also ask them to help keep track of your time. This is actually a very subtle thing, but it adds a lot to your work brain challenge. So right
Okay.
now, what we've done here is defining and framing the problem.
Okay.
Um, I can give you another example if you want to try this process again, or do you want to move on to the next step?
Um, let's move to the next step.
Okay. So next is brainstorm broad solutions. Okay, so let's add a few things. Let's just say you're a new startup and you're gonna use a import type of solution where I shouldn't specify this. Um, let's just say new e-commerce merchants. Let's just say less than 100 sales is your target, and you are targeting just like first time merchants.
Okay.
Okay, so this is kind of the constraints or the assumptions I'm giving you. You have a lot of potential solutions in your approach, which is going to be through here, and
Right.
also for different vectors of approaching credibility.
Right.
So what would you do?
Um, so okay. Right. So because our users are first time merchants. I mean, sorry, we're designing for first time merchants who have less than 100 sales. Um, I was thinking, and this might be a bad move since I'm sort of already thinking about what to design, but um, I wanted to focus more on the onboarding process of when these first time merchants actually post, I make a listing for the product. So meaning when they start the process of creating a listing product listing on their account, what type of information should we feed the merchants so they have the best guidelines to make to make a really credible and trustworthy product listing, so that when a user scans it, or sees the listing, it's good. Like it looks real. It looks trustworthy at the end of the day.
Okay, so open question to you is, so you're thinking you're going to somehow design some sort of flow within either during the new user onboarding or shortly after when they're creating a new
Yes.
product.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking about what information to show merchants.
Mm-hmm.
Have you also thought about what info or like what the merchant is capable of at this point, considering they're a first time merchant with less than 100 sales total?
Um,
And less than 100 sales isn't one distinct type of user too. There's a journey attached to that as well. Like somebody who has 0 sales, somebody who has 100 sales, they're gonna have access to different constraints.
no, I never really thought about that. I wouldn't, and this is my own fault, but I wouldn't know the difference. I mean, sorry, not the difference. I wouldn't know what to expect from people who have made less than 100 sales in comparison to the first time sale.
Well, let's just set some anchor points, right? So let's say
Okay.
0 sales, let's say 50 sales, and then 100 sales, right? And let's also define credibility, right?
Okay.
What
Credibility. Okay.
makes e-commerce product more credible?
So a product listing, I'm sorry, I'm assuming at this point that the e-commerce product is the listing itself, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So generally speaking, a product listing that is more credible should show, like, physically the images that is on the listing is the actual images of the product, not like some stock images that they can just web scrape off of the internet first.
Okay, so actual images, but what about image quality?
Image
Is it
quality.
better for the product to have a really nice product image or a realistic product image, but the image quality is quite low, like they took on their smartphone?
Oh, okay. When I think of quality, I'm thinking of resolution. Like, meaning like the amount of pixels and the amount of the amount of pixels in the image and how high
Well,
def the image is. That's when I think when it comes to
there's
quality.
also like setup too, right? If they have the really nice like
Oh,
white boxes, it's on a white background versus they take an image with their DSLR of the actual thing itself, like what's better?
I think
Yeah.
at that time,
And if you
and
don't know this information, you can also make a hypothesis, right?
right.
You have context here, so you might know, but if you're in a position where you don't, you can say you don't know. Like just say this is my hypothesis because of what I do know, and this is how you would find that information online, or
Right.
how you would like get that answer in a real setting.
Oh, okay. And this actually sort of led me to more of a thought process now, because going back to the anchor points of 0 sales, 50 sales, 100 sales, right? And tying that to image setup, like people who have 0 sales, I don't think they have the same environment, or they're working in the same environment as an individual who has 100
Exactly.
sales, right? Whereas they might have like a very nice setup of amazing lighting and all that stuff. Um, so for 0 sales, at that point, you can only, I guess the information that I should feed the merchant with 0 sales is having, you know, just some sort of minimal setup, or like some sort of minimal requirements of the image.
So before we get too deep here, we
Yeah,
just start brainstorming images at a high level. Let's talk about some of the other options as well before going too deep.
right.
Because keep in mind, we're still thinking about broad solutions here. But
Oh,
I just wanted to
true.
get you to get like slightly more granular. So, instead of images, say like the it's technically uh image accuracy, right?
Okay,
And there's image quality and then image setup. So that's kind of like the hierarchy here,
right.
right?
And
When
that's
and that's
okay.
only one bullet.
Um, I mean, the product listing, or at least the merchant, is offering some sort of safe measures in case the buyer doesn't like it, like a free returns within a free shipping and return within a certain amount of time. Um, we could do, um, oh, we can actually add some sort of review for, actually no, for zero sales, you don't.
Well, think about it. So I wrote some of the common ones, right? Ratings and reviews.
Mhm,
Um, and then think about the constraints in terms of the numbers of sales, keeping in mind that there's going to be a conversion rate as well, right? It's like even if they had 100% conversion rate, is having 100 ratings enough? Is it too little for it to really matter? Is reviews better? How do you incentivize user reviews? Um, and for example, like, if they're at the 100 sale point, maybe at this point they can start getting ratings, but at 50 sales, they want
right,
reviews. And
right.
at 0 sales, you need to focus on the image, a policy, and writing a really good product description, right?
Mm, right. Okay.
So do you see how I'm like unpacking the problem into like many possible paths and thinking about it a little bit more intently?
Yeah, yeah. Whereas earlier I was only focusing on one possible solution, and
Yeah,
you're
like
just
one thing you want to avoid in a whiteboarding challenge is it seems like, 10 minutes in, you're locked onto a solution and then you're not deviating from that solution.
right.
Like 15 minutes in, I'm usually still like, here is my thinking, here are the possible kind of vectors and stuff to really think about.
Okay. Um, so okay. Yeah. Generally from here on out, because you have already five solutions, what is like a good sweet spot in terms of the number of solution that you should present, you know?
There really is no sweet spot. Like obviously, like just keep it under, I'd say like 3 to 5 is a good number. Definitely under 10, but there is no magic number. It depends, right?
Oh, okay.
It depends on the constraints too. Like if I added more constraints, it'd be a lot harder to come up with 5 answers. What if
Right.
it's only people with 0 sales, right? Then you would eliminate ratings and
And
reviews
reviews.
immediately.
Okay.
So at this point, like the interviewer might add a constraint just to like, drive you forward. Or maybe you can propose it too. It's like, hey, like here's a lot of possible solutions. Um, I think it's like most critical to focus on people with like 0 sales because at that point they provide zero lifetime value to the company. But once they've made their first sale, like the lifetime value increases exponentially. You can come up with the reason, right? So
Okay.
let's say I change this to like 0 sales instead, then these don't become relevant anymore.
Right.
Um, and then you're left with like kind of these three. And then you're still kind of thinking about broad solutions. You can write like hypotheses if you want, but usually now, like I think these are done in 30 or 45 minutes. You might not have time. So the next part is IA. And I use IA very, very loosely. Like I don't mean you need to create information architecture diagram, but you need to create some sort of diagram. It can be like a flow chart or boxes or circles or whatever you want, just to conceptualize a problem space.
Okay.
Um, so it could be in reference to like the different types of user flows. or an individual segment of the entire flow, which you might have here. It could be related to their business model. It really depends on you, just some sort of conceptual diagram.
Okay. So for solution, okay. So earlier I said about like solution is in onboarding because I feel as if that if merchants were to were fed more good examples of what were like what product listing has sold successfully, then they'll mimic that. So for when they're about to set up the so merchants would typically when they click on the product listing will create a product listing. They'll be fed a few screens that shows them what they should do. Like, and these screens might, might show them going back to the solutions, what possible solutions, like the type of image quality, what to look for, what users look for in an image. But ideally, this could be at least like 3 screens in the onboarding process where it shows the merchant what to do. And
So you're thinking that adding a product would be part of onboarding?
um, I'm thinking that like the moment, again, this is because this is in the context of 0 sales, merchants of 0 sales, right?
Yeah.
This is literally their, well, I guess there's a lock. I mean, there's like this tutorial feature that if you don't make your first sale, right, this feature will always pop up. So when they click on the create a product listing, this will always show like,
Okay.
and so when they click on add a product, a series of onboarding screens will initiate, right? It'll guide the user through this journey of how to create a perfect, I mean, well, a genuine or a good product listing.
Okay.
Um,
So walk me through that.
so the first screen will essentially be the title. The title, I mean, the product description of what the user expects, what the buyer expects to see. So product description is first screen. Product title is first screen. The second will be images, which this will show the image quality or like subtle description of image quality. Third will be description. Fourth would be policy. Actually, no, policy is already in the description if you think about it.
Point.
Oh, price. Um, do you think that's no? Okay.
I think it depends on how you execute it, so I don't want to bias you yet. If you're thinking about a wizard style, or a stepper flow, that might hurt the click-through rate quite a bit.
Uh,
Well, I'm curious to see what you come up with. Hopefully you come up with like multiple solutions. Okay, so product title, images, description, price. What else?
Honestly, I don't. Sorry, we could go back to the. I'm just looking at the return of policies now, right? Because I don't think that's a necessary step. Because if we were to design the description onboarding page, it should state within the description, I mean, state in the description that you should include X, Y, and Z in the description so users will know what to expect. This might include product details, specs, and even refund and even policies that you offer, right? Well, or we can just change the return and refund policies as an actual badge at the end of the day.
I think you're thinking too granularly right now. Focus higher level on just the content pieces and how we're going to rearrange them.
Okay.
So you're thinking about after the complete onboarding, there's going to be some sort of
I'm sorry. After the onboarding is complete, I'm thinking.
also, I don't know if I can change this just for the sake of time, but also mention earlier on that we're a new startup and we don't know how we're going to get we're a new startup
merchants.
trying
Right.
to, improve credibility of people online, right?
Right.
Of new sellers online. You are building, like, like you're either assuming that we're building our own e-commerce builder, or you're
Mhm.
assuming that you're just somehow going to add their products to this third-party app just to improve their credibility. That's a lot of friction.
Right. And
You just look for them to import products,
well,
or
just so on the
or
same
okay, maybe
page.
I misled you as well because I also said for zero sales, so that might have skewed you in the wrong direction.
I also already made a mistake of, again, the initial prompt was brand new product, right? So I was supposed to build a new platform from scratch, and this is only the primary. Wait, is this okay? I was under the assumption that I was supposed to build something from scratch.
You ideally should be building something from scratch, but you said you want to focus on just the
Right.
onboarding of that
Hmm.
new experience. So,
Okay.
and this is definitely my fault too, because I'm controlling the screen and you don't have your visual cues as reminders. Let's just say instead of we're a new startup, let's just say we're Shopify.
Okay.
And I think we can keep everything else the same.
Okay. So, um, your previous question was what's going to happen after the onboarding process is finished, correct?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah.
Um, so after the onboarding process has finished, I uh, I think it's good that there's a set of requirements that is shown believe there's a set of requirements, sort of like description indicators when the user is typing in, for example, a title, right? There's going to be a set of guidelines beneath the input field of what they should include or what to insert or I was thinking about that.
Try and
Uh,
imagine that. That
so
seems
like
like it's gonna be a very cluttered page.
the thing is, these texts only appear once the state is active, right? So when you click on the input field, these set of texts will pop up beneath the input field, which helps the merchant. Um, yeah, helps the merchant, I guess, make up a title that is good. I didn't realize that this is actually part of the AI until now. So,
Okay, so yeah, I think that's fine. I just added a few other steps here as part of this flow,
oh, I didn't.
just to see if it'll trigger anything and give you context.
Okay.
Um, so right now you're thinking about some sort of like contextual, like help panel recommendation thing,
Mm-hmm.
overlaid on top of the add a product page. If it's a first experience, you can do something that's more guided, and then at the end, show them how these inputs look like on a normal edit page for the next time they go into it. But at the start, maybe you can just surface these like one screen at a time and really educate them on the best practices and how to do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's one way, but this is only one direction too, where you're just focused on making the content seem more credible. There's also the solution of doing badges and verification. Since you're now Shopify, you can actually do something. You could do a completely different approach where you're like trying to figure out like do people trust badges or verification badges and what is the threshold and how can you design a system to like automate that within Shopify. That's a completely different solution from this. So I think ideally it would be nice if you came up with both directions and then either explain the rationale or engage with the interviewer to see like, oh, like which one makes more sense, or you can make a call yourself and then kind of flesh it out in terms of the big pieces. And then you want to start with the, the visual, the interaction design of a very specific flow. So that could be just this piece, and then the visual, and then the final polish. Keep in mind though, this is just my personal approach. Take it with a grain of salt. I just want to give you some reference points. Um, there are some people that prefer more of a story-driven approach where they try and put themselves in the shoes of the end user and then talk through a sample user journey. So that's also a valid approach. Yeah, any thoughts so far? Don't beat yourself up though, by the way, if you don't get to the exact solutions I did. The whole point of this exercise is that everyone will come up with a different solution based off their own experiences and context.
Right. Uh, so what I'm struggling with is that when, like, I focus on one thing too granularly, and then during that moment when I'm focusing on one thing, I start to realize the mistakes. Like, I start to realize, oh well, that could have, I don't think that'll work actually. Maybe I should take that back, and then
That's actually perfectly fine, and that's actually expected. And we're not expecting you to like go through each step linearly perfectly without going back. This is like roughly what I do first pass, but as I go through each of these steps, I'm like, oh wait, this doesn't make sense. We can go back and like clarify this or tweak this or add a constraint. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. All right. So for the IA,
You don't have to do it like this, by the way. But an easy way for me is like I just write out the big words. I try and arrange them in like
yeah,
a thing, and then I'll draw the arrows in afterwards.
yeah.
Sometimes if it's easier for you, you can do a journey map
Okay.
of the end user. Or you can even do a wire flow if you are more visual. So you can use any format you want. You're not restricted to this.
Okay. Okay. Do you think we can tackle another prompt just really quickly on just
Yeah,
defining the
absolutely.
problem?
Let's do it. I want you. I'm assuming you're comfortable with the last half because this is like pretty standard.
As long, I mean, typically if I have more information, it helped me visualize
Mhm.
what the next step is. But if I don't gather the context enough, I'm sort of left with this blank canvas in my head.
No worries.
So,
All right, let's give you a new one. This is a real one that I got from Instacart. You are New York Times. Your journalists often need to reference citations using your internal database, which does not have a search or filter feature yet. Design one, sorry. Not a real English sentence, but hopefully you can understand.
No worries. Times journalists often need to reference citation using your internal database, which does not have a search function yet.
Okay, so this time I am not going to say anything. I have these red circles here to remind you of certain things you want to highlight and probe deeper on, but that is it.
Yeah. Would it be possible for you to zoom out a bit so I can have other point of references as well? Yeah, that's great. Okay. So we already know. So wait, this is an Instacart. I mean, should I already know that? Should I already know that this is?
You are New York Times. I'll start with the idle conversation. I said this was the whiteboarding challenge Instacart gave me when I interviewed them, so it should be relatively reflective of what's in industry.
Okay. Journalists often use to reference citation using your internal data, which does not have a okay.
Let me know if you need help.
Right. Okay. I'm actually really lost.
In your mind, run through like who, what, when, where, why. And
So,
are there ones that are relevant but unanswered? That's one approach. Second approach is to start dissecting the prompt itself.
so we're okay. So we're
Do you
so the
want to?
who the who. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was like, if it's helpful for you, I can ask you questions if you're really, really stuck. But ideally,
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So we're actually, would it be better? Can you ask me questions actually?
okay, cool. As New York Times, why is this problem worth solving? The answer is buried in the prompt here.
Oh, okay.
You want to call it out.
Because there isn't a search or there isn't a
That's
search or
that's
filter.
not a business outcome. A business outcome isn't to have search or filter. Why is New York Times as a business interested in building this feature? I'm gonna keep slowly talking and dropping more hints, but stop me if you think you got it.
Um,
As New York Times, a business, I employ journalists as employees who work for me on an hourly basis.
oh, is it? I mean, it's important to look up the employees within the internal database.
You're you need to reference citations
Right.
like news articles, data. This is like basically the sources in the articles you publish. So it's part of your job.
Okay.
As a employee of New York Times, the business, part of my writing process is using the internal database to find citations, which currently does not have a search or filter feature yet.
I'm sorry.
So it takes me a long
Yeah.
time as a employee. Some might even say I waste a lot of time. You're cutting costs.
I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm just not getting it. That's my own fault.
Oh, okay, okay. So think about it this way, right? So generates revenue, cut costs, acquire new users, retain users, right? These are the four goals.
Right.
For the first one, which was it? What's the business goal here?
Generate revenue. Well, acquire new users since initially it was a startup, right? Because the first initial prompt was a startup, but then we changed it to Shopify.
Yeah, let's just say you're Shopify. Why, as Shopify, are you interested in helping new e-commerce merchants build credibility?
If they're credible, then it helps Shopify generate revenue
And
and retain users.
why?
Because because wouldn't more sales influence the user to stay on Shopify?
Yeah. So this is actually really important. It's, second order thinking. It's like, can you as a designer, like tie whatever you're doing to the organization's like bigger goals?
Right.
It's generally good to anchor in one of these. So this one over here, it's cut costs, right? Because, and maybe this is my fault, I didn't make it clear enough, but you're a business, you hire your employees waste a lot of time doing this thing as part of their job. If you redesign this thing to make it faster and more efficient, then they save a lot of hours on this process. So you're cutting costs here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all.
It's okay. You just have to like think about it from a business perspective, right? I
Okay.
guarantee nearly every problem worth solving will tackle one of these. Generally, if it's like a new market opportunity, it's going to be generating revenue. If it's more of a mature organization like New York Times, generally it's cutting
Cutting
costs
costs.
and generating revenue. And for startups, anything marketing, growth, social media, SEO related, it's related to acquisition, landing page bounce rates, lead conversion, any of that. It's acquiring users. Anything to make your current users happy and more successful is generally retaining users. And
Okay.
depending on your business model, it might be generate revenue as well.
Okay.
So here, the second piece is reference. And then there's also, so maybe here is the question's like, can you think of at least one question related to each highlighted word here that would significantly impact the solution that you yeah, and you can also ask questions not related to this, but these are the main ones.
Okay. Um,
Easiest way to start is like, what does this word mean in this context? You can't ask it like that, but use it to start your trail of thinking.
um, wait, so I mean, I can't ask that. I mean, so I'm internally asking myself, like, what?
Yeah, and then hopefully either stating an assumption or forming a better question. You can even ask it if you're really stuck, it's better than like, being an awkward silence. Just be like, what does reference mean in this context? And then you can give examples. Um, you know, is it just pulling out a page number? Is it copying out a link? Is it formatting in like APA style? Is it embedding something? Are you just like mentioning it like, colloquially in the article?
Wow.
That's really important because when you design your search or filter feature, you might want that thing they need to reference be really accessible, right?
All
Um,
right. It's, it's actually,
and then
I'm getting so much, just so much right. I mean, thinking block right now. Um,
um, this is hard stuff, man. Like, especially if you were taught design kind of the non-problem solving way, it's hard to kind of think of these things. But once you kind of develop the habit, it makes all your designs a billion times better because you're actually shooting at a goal now in the future instead of just designing randomly or designing to make things pretty. You have
right.
an actual goal in mind. And once you have a goal in mind, even if you don't get there 100%, if you can articulate it and explain it and demonstrate it, you just become a much more high valued designer. So here, like search and filter, you can ask things like, how many results are there? Because if there's like 10 million citations versus 1,000 citations, you might design things very, very differently. Search and filter is kind of more just like, what are the categories or the content models that you're working with? Um, this is another one too, like internal database is like what does internal mean? Like how do people access it, right? Do you need VPN? Is it like a book? Is it an internal website? This might also be an example where as you're approaching this whiteboarding challenge, you might want to do it from more of a journey map perspective. But there's no like I'll also say like to do what we just did here, right? This is like let's say a 10 out of 10. Like you oftentimes only need like a 6 out of 10 to pass like this portion of it. So don't get discouraged if you feel like you're not getting all of these right, because there is no right or wrong answer. It's just the approach.
Right.
I'm just trying
Sure.
to emphasize, if it's not obvious enough, like ask questions, deconstruct the prompt, like kind of read between the lines, think about the business goals, think about the product hypothesis.
I have so much to think about.
Is this helpful? I don't
No,
know.
this is helpful. This is by far, it is very helpful. Don't think otherwise. I'm just trying to process this all at once because I've never really thought about it this way before. So now that I'm dipping, like putting my feet in the water in this new way of thinking, I'm just having trouble processing everything at once. Um, but I think what I'm gonna do in the future is like if I'm dissecting, if I try to dissect a prompt, I'm definitely gonna have that 4 buckets right next to it, just because
Yeah.
I can use as an anchor point to like,
You
oh
can
well,
even say, and you can include this in your process too, but like generally when I approach a design problem, I want to think about the high level business goals. From my experience, all business goals kind of fall into these 4 buckets.
right.
So I just want to think about, from the context of a designer at this company or this position, and given this prompt, like what is the ultimate business goal I'm going to anchor
Mm,
my success on? And you can literally write out like, hey, look at my knowledge. Here are 4 of the
right.
bucket. You can even like write out the prompt again and then start circling like, oh, like there's some words here that are ambiguous or need to be better defined. Here are my assumptions about this word. That's really all there is to it.
Mm, okay.
Like this part too, like I'd even say like this is optional, like it's a nice. But if it trips you up, like, this isn't the priority here, it'd be good to come with more than one solution. Like two would be ideal, at least. Two very different directions to solve the problem. Like this
Right.
one, like I feel like you focus like a little bit too much on just the images. I was trying to like expand outwards into
Right.
thinking about other things. So when you approach this one too, right? Like maybe there's only a search or filter, but like maybe there's a browse. Like here's how I designed the solution if you're curious, right? I'm like, okay, like um solution one, like this is the bad example. You just literally just design a good
That's
search, filter,
right.
browse experience, right? Solution two, can we design and like a plugin or extension that goes on top of the journalist's writing software and allow them to do um, inline references plus citations using a quick search bar, right? And then solution two is obviously way better because you're cutting out the middleman, but you would never get to solution two without dissecting these questions.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does make a lot of sense. Um,
Like
it's
this is like senior level, and then this is junior level. Because junior, you take all the prompts and the context at face value, you don't challenge it.
right.
Senior, like the solution might look relatively the same skill wise, but senior, they kind of pick apart the question, they frame the prompt
Yeah.
a lot better, and that unlocks a possible like global maxima solution
Right.
rather than just being locked into like
Yeah. I'm
an
just
out of
reading it. I'm just reading it now. Like you wouldn't be able to deduct any of that unless you have asked the questions that's needed to get to
yeah,
that point.
yeah. I hope I'm not overwhelming you by like giving you like the ideal. Like that's what I think you should like strive towards. But I just know that like the expectation isn't this high, so don't freak out or anything.
Look, I mean, to some extent, I am overwhelmed, but I think it's better to be overwhelmed now than be overwhelmed
Yeah.
later, right?
Then like
So
in the whiteboarding challenge, right? Yeah.
yeah, obviously there's still a lot to think about, and I'm gonna use this video as a reference when I'm practicing. Um, but at this point, I just gotta talk. I just gotta speak more and think quickly, and figure out how to dissect the prompt so I can gather more contacts to
Yeah.
my
And
advantage.
think about it. Like, I don't know how you are with these last three.
Hmm.
This isn't really a step, but like the last three.
Mhm.
But if you feel like you're confident here, just like focus on like the first segment, do it bit by bit. There's a lot of resources online and communities where you can kind of collaborate
Right.
and just do like mock interviews with each other.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I think I have one of them, but I haven't used it yet just because I'm not confident enough to do it yet. But the more I practice, the more I get used to it.
yeah. I'll also say that this isn't one of the things that you can just yourself like with headphones on in your room. Like you actually need to practice talking and thinking on the spot.
Right.
Um, I don't know if you have like a plushie or something, just like talk to it, or like a family member, SO or friend. I think when I started, I just like practiced with my girlfriend. I'd be like, hey, read these prompts. You don't have to grade me, but I just need to talk to someone.
I think there was a member in the group on the Facebook group 2 months ago that was doing like mock-up whiteboarding challenges. So I might do the same thing and post like a
Yeah, you should make a post and you
yeah,
should do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll use that as, my way of practicing with an actual person so we can figure it out. Do you mind sending me that document?
That's fine.
So yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll send it to you right now.
Appreciate it.
Cool. And then you have the recording, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop recording now.